Hello ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to see you again in today's news program. Here, we and you will share and interact with the latest news and hottest events that are of interest to the public at home and abroad. Details will be available shortly.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said on September 11th that the country would deploy military, police, and militia forces to 284 combat fronts across the country, in a move aimed at demonstrating its military capabilities. This development comes amid tensions between Venezuela and the United States that have heated up in recent times. Venezuela has affirmed that it is always ready to engage in dialogue and negotiations, but needs to be respected. Mr. Maduro did not specify how many soldiers, police, or militia would be deployed to the 284 locations. His government previously announced the deployment of 25,000 additional troops to the border with Colombia, an area suspected of drug trafficking. From Ciudad Caribia, the central coastal region, we are ready for a war if necessary on the entire Venezuelan coast, from the border with Colombia to the east of the country, from north to south, and from east to west. We have prepared the regular forces, Maduro said in a live television broadcast early in the morning. Maduro himself has repeatedly denied U.S. accusations that Venezuela is linked to drug cartels, asserting that the South American country is a country fighting against the trafficking of these toxic substances. He also denied allegations of being linked to the Chinda Arawa, a drug trafficking organization that Venezuela has eradicated.
On September 11th, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Lando warned on social media that Washington could take action against foreigners who justify or downplay the murder of activist Charlie Kirk, an ally of U.S. President Donald Trump. Mr. Lando said he had instructed consular officials to take appropriate action. The U.S. official called the incident a horrific assassination, emphasizing that foreigners who downplay violence and hatred are not welcome in the United States. Mr. Lando said he had seen some people on social media justifying or downplaying the event and had instructed consular officials to take appropriate action. Some people responded to Mr. Lando's post with screenshots of accounts and posts, although it is unclear whether these accounts belong to people holding U.S. visas. The U.S. Deputy Secretary later responded to some comments, saying he would instruct consular officials to monitor the responses. When asked about Mr. Lando's post, a State Department spokesperson said the administration does not believe the U.S. should grant visas to individuals whose presence in our country is not in line with national security interests. However, the spokesperson did not answer questions about whether anyone had been identified for visa revocation or how consular officials would evaluate those reported in response to Mr. Lando's post. Charlie Kirk, 31, was an author, podcast host, and ally of U.S. President Donald Trump, was seen as instrumental in helping Mr. Trump and the Republican Party attract votes from young voters. During a speech on the return of America on October 10, Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of the conservative organization Turning Point USA, received a question from an audience member about mass shootings, and shortly thereafter, Kirk himself became a victim of a shooting. The prominent political activist died from a gunshot wound to the neck. Police have not yet apprehended a suspect or determined the motive for the assassination. However, observers say the incident has all the hallmarks of a politically motivated murder. Former Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords said, "Democratic societies will always have political disagreements, but we must not allow America to become a country that resolves disagreements with violence." Giffords herself was shot in the head in a near-fatal assassination attempt in 2011. In the 14 years since, attacks and threats against U.S. politicians have surged. 3 months ago, a masked gunman shot 2 Minnesota state lawmakers, killing one. In April, the home of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was set on fire while he and his family were sleeping inside. During last year's campaign, U.S. President Donald Trump was twice the target of assassination attempts. On October 10, a Florida state court completed the jury selection process for the trial of Ryan Roe, a suspect who brought a gun to a golf course with the intent to assassinate Mr. Trump, but was discovered and stopped in time by the Secret Service. Giffords understands the alarming state of political violence in America better than anyone. After recovering from the assassination attempt, She has repeatedly called on Americans to resolve political differences with words instead of bullets. However, those calls seem to have gone unheard. She said this summer America has witnessed many politically motivated assassinations, first a Democratic lawmaker, and now a Republican activist. Dangerous individuals have used guns to express their dissatisfaction. Both parties are targeted. Both sides have a moral and patriotic duty to find ways to stop the gun violence that is claiming so many lives. Not only politicians or political activists, but judges in the U.S. have also become targets of attacks. Justice Brett Kavanaugh was the target of an unsuccessful assassination attempt in 2022. Recent surveys show that the acceptance rate of using violence for political purposes in the U.S. is increasing. Robert P., who directs the Chicago Project on Security and Threats, described the results of his team's survey in May as the most alarming to date. About 40% of Democrats support using force against Trump, while 25% of Republicans want to deploy military forces to prevent protests against the president's agenda. These numbers have doubled since last fall, Pett said. We are increasingly becoming a violent society and call the current moment the era of violent populism. Some friends said that Kitch is a passionate political activist, inspiring and regarded as a leading voice of conservative youth in the U.S. J.E.D., a longtime friend and supervisor of Trump's campaign activities and finances, said that Kitch's death is a heavy and irreplaceable loss for the Republican Party. Besides President Trump, no one in the party has Kitch's level of appeal among conservative activists. This conservative activist supported many of Trump's controversial policies. His podcast also contributed to Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results against Joe Biden. Honper, who was scheduled to debate Kitch later this month, said in his live broadcast on the 10th that the shooting could spark a wave of revenge, which is very worrying. Some right-wing activists have called for violent actions in response to Kitch's murder. Lip of TikTok, a right-wing X account, posted, "This is war." Kai Cheney, a Politico analyst, commented that threats and actual attacks have become part of political life in Washington. Many U.S. congressmen describe it as a new normal, and the situation is becoming increasingly grim. But even in that context, the Kitch murder still caused a strong shock at Capitol Hill. Congressman Steve Scalise, who almost died after being shot on a baseball field a decade ago, said there is no excuse for political violence in our country. It must end. Many Democratic and Republican members have strongly condemned violence in politics. Joe Scarborough, host of MSNBC's Morning Joe, commented that violence against political activists is violence against American democracy and the freedom of expression of all Americans. Tommy Vietor, a Democratic member and former White House staffer under Obama, warned that political violence is a spreading cancer that will tear the country apart. Writer Emily Janty asked on social media X, "What the hell have we become?" Another person commented under the post, "We are facing an enemy, and that is ourselves."
On September 11th, after an emergency meeting on the Israeli airstrike on a target in the Qatari capital Doha, the UN Security Council said it condemned the airstrike on Doha on September 9th and called for de-escalation, but did not mention Israel. The statement made clear that the Security Council should emphasize the importance of de-escalation and express solidarity with Qatar. All 15 members of the Security Council, including the United States, agreed with the statement, stressing their support for Qatar's sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, the Security Council document did not mention Israel as the perpetrator of the airstrike. The Security Council described Doha as a key mediator in peace talks between Israel and Hamas. The statement said, Council members stressed that the release of hostages and an end to hostilities and suffering in Gaza must be our top priority. Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani, who attended the emergency meeting of the Security Council, welcomed the statement and reaffirmed Qatar's commitment to maintaining its role as a mediator in the conflict. We will continue our humanitarian and diplomatic role without hesitation to stop the carnage, but will not resort to any attack on our sovereignty. We will reserve the right to respond through the means provided for in international law. At the Security Council meeting, the acting U.S. ambassador to the UN Daradashi said that unilateral airstrikes on Qatar, a sovereign state that is working with the U.S. as a mediator, will not advance the goals of Tenavad or Washington. She described the incident as regrettable but stressed that President Trump believes this could be an opportunity for peace. UN Undersecretary General for Political Affairs Rosemary DCO expressed concern that the airstrike on Doha was an alarming escalation that risks opening a new and dangerous phase in this devastating conflict.